The mother-in-law shouted and struck her pregnant daughter-in-law in front of the entire family. But Anya calmly opened her purse, pulled out a tattered envelope, and handed it to her mother-in-law. Upon opening it, the older woman turned pale. The mother-in-law's shout echoed as she swung her hand and forcefully slapped the pregnant Anya across the cheek, causing her to stagger and instinctively clutch her side. The living room fell into a deathly silence. The numerous relatives gathered for the older couple's wedding anniversary were stunned by this sudden act. No one expected that Margarita Pavlovna, usually poised and refined, was capable of such an outburst of rage. She had long harbored a quiet, growing dislike for her daughter-in-law, and now it had erupted in the most dramatic way. Anya was a quiet young woman, outwardly fragile, but inwardly remarkably resilient. At just 24 years old, she was expecting her first child, her belly already noticeably rounded. Yet, even in this condition, she displayed rare composure. Her lower lip trembled from the pain, and her eyes welled up as she desperately tried to maintain her dignity. The mother-in-law's face, on the other hand, showed a flicker of triumph, as if she believed she had put the upstart in her place and demonstrated to the family who was in charge and what kind of order should prevail. A soft gasp came from one of the female guests, Anya's aunt, Ludmilla. She had always known Margarita Pavlovna to be strict and haughty, but never thought she would stoop to physical violence. Yet the fact remained. The slap rang out, shattering the festive atmosphere. The guests, who moments ago had been chatting lively, fell silent, unsure where to look. Anya hesitated for a moment, then straightened up. She felt both ashamed and hurt, but refused to appear pitiful. In this situation, she had one vital shield, her resolve not to give in. With a quiet sigh, she opened her small, elegant pastel-colored purse, reached inside, and pulled out a worn envelope. It looked old, its edges frayed, as if it had been tucked away in someone's closet for years. But for Anya, judging by her expression, this envelope was something profoundly significant. She lifted her eyes to her mother-in-law, meeting her gaze directly, trying to hide her inner trembling, and handed her the envelope. "Take it, Margarita Pavlovna," Anya said calmly, though her voice quivered slightly. "Look inside." Caught off guard by her daughter-in-law's response, the mother-in-law stared at her coldly, expecting some foolish stunt, perhaps an apology or tears of humiliation. Instead, she was handed this mysterious envelope. Margarita Pavlovna's lips twisted as she scanned the contents, her eyes darting over the lines. The guests noticed how the confidence that had sparkled in her gaze just moments ago gave way to confusion and fear. The room grew tense, the air thick and charged, as if electrified. Margarita clutched the paper and looked at Anya, as if facing a dangerous enemy she needed to neutralize before they caused even greater trouble. Some guests, including Anya's husband, Sergei, rushed toward her to offer comfort. Sergei looked frightened and bewildered. On one hand, he couldn't fathom why his mother was so enraged at Anya. On the other, he was puzzled by what was in the envelope that had such an effect on her. He was deeply worried for his wife, especially given her pregnancy, knowing that any added stress could harm both her and their unborn child. Anya stood calmly, her hands resting on her belly as if protecting her baby, watching as her mother-in-law gripped the envelope tightly. The nervous trembling of Margarita's lips and her frantic glances between Anya and the paper made it clear that something in that letter had upended her worldview, or at least threatened to expose something she had worked so hard to conceal. "What's in there?" Sergei finally broke the silence, his voice thick with indignation. "Why did you hit Anya? What's in that paper?" Margarita Pavlovna, realizing all eyes were on her, straightened her back and tried to regain her composure. She couldn't afford to show weakness. Known as the Iron Lady, tall, stately, with a pristine hairstyle and an elegant dress, she had trained herself from a young age to suppress emotions, viewing them as a sign of weakness. But now, something had gone wrong. Her emotions had gotten the better of her, and this outburst was proof. "It's nothing," she said coldly, tucking the crumpled pages back into the envelope. "It's personal. No need for everyone to know." "Personal?" countered the family patriarch, Alexander Ivanovich, a man of advancing years with a commanding yet calmer demeanor. "Your behavior is unacceptable. You struck your pregnant daughter-in-law in front of everyone." He glanced around at the many guests, uncles, aunts, cousins, and distant relatives. "Can this be swept under the rug? We all came for a celebration, and you've turned it into a farce. What's in that letter?" "It doesn't matter," Margarita insisted stubbornly, her demeanor signaling that the conversation was over. Her hands still trembled, and her gaze was steely, but something in her behavior betrayed her fear of how events might unfold, perhaps dreading what might be revealed. The family dynamics were at risk of changing forever. Anya looked at her husband, then at the patriarch, and spoke slowly. "I think my mother-in-law is mistaken about the importance of this letter. It does concern the family. I'm sorry it's happening here and now, but since it started, maybe it's best to clear things up." She spoke calmly, trying not to raise her voice, though inside she was shaking with nerves. She knew, standing among so many relatives, she had to show strength, or they would trample her and continue to humiliate her, putting her unborn child at risk. She didn't want to live in constant fear of her mother-in-law sparking another scandal. "Perhaps we should discuss this privately, without all the relatives," someone suggested. But it was too late. The situation had reached a point where hiding was pointless. Too many people had witnessed the open conflict, and rumors would soon spread. Anya didn't want to become a victim of gossip in a world ruled by her mother-in-law's disdain. Sergei glanced hesitantly at his wife. He didn't know whose side to take. On one hand, he loved Anya and worried for her and her health. On the other, he was raised to respect his mother, who had always seemed to him the epitome of a proper, cold, but fair woman. Her striking Anya seemed like madness, so unlike her usual demeanor, leaving him torn by an internal conflict. The word pauper, which his mother had hurled at Anya, still rang in his ears. He couldn't understand where such contempt came from. He knew Anya came from an ordinary family, perhaps not wealthy, but entirely respectable. He had never considered her a pauper. What fueled this rage? Anya looked at Sergei, her gaze pleading for support. Stung by his own indecision, he stepped forward, put his arm around her shoulders, and turned to his mother. "Mom, I demand an explanation," he said firmly. "Your behavior is wrong. You may be upset about something, but hitting my pregnant wife is beyond the line. I need to know what's written in that paper you read." Margarita Pavlovna gripped the crumpled pages tighter and looked at her son with desperation. She realized denial was futile. Everyone was waiting for answers. If she kept stonewalling, her reputation might suffer even more. With a heavy sigh, she said, "Fine, if you all insist on knowing what's in here." She pulled out the paper and carefully unfolded it. "This is evidence that Anya is after our inheritance. Yes, a poor girl from a simple family who, it turns out, isn't so simple. She has a plan to seize our family's wealth." The guests murmured in confusion, some shaking their heads, others standing to get a better look at the document. Anya sighed, listening to her mother-in-law's familiar accusations, but this time she refused to stay silent. "That's not true," she declared loudly enough for all to hear. "Margarita Pavlovna, you know it's not just evidence. It's excerpts and letters that confirm something else entirely. Please don't twist the truth. Margarita unfolded the paper and read aloud selective phrases, pulling them out of context, something about financial transactions, money transfers, and inheritance rights. It sounded convoluted, as if Anya were indeed scheming to exploit Sergei's family for gain. But Anya's expression showed she disagreed with these conclusions. Whispers began among the guests. Some, more impressionable, leaned toward believing Margarita's accusations, while those who knew Anya better couldn't fathom where such claims came from. Read the entire text, Anya requested firmly. Don't cherry-pick phrases. Explain the letters attached to it. Margarita hesitated, glancing at the crowd. She didn't want to delve deeper, knowing that reading the full document and its comments might unravel her narrative. But seeing that everyone demanded the truth, she reluctantly continued, now reading excerpts from another letter. It mentioned a secret, that Anya wasn't who she claimed to be, that her parents weren't who they seemed, and that the family harbored critical information about Margarita Pavlovna's past. The words harbored critical information about Margarita Pavlovna heightened the tension to its peak, and it seemed everyone held their breath. What past did this commanding woman have? What was her connection to Anya? It dawned on the room that things were far more complex than they seemed, that there might be another side to the story, and perhaps the root of the mother-in-law's intolerance toward her daughter-in-law lay in this history. Enough, Margarita Pavlovna cried, realizing she had gone too far. There's no need to read this. It's just a forgery. I won't continue. Anya looked at her intently, but calmly. She wasn't trying to expose her mother-in-law at all costs in front of everyone. She sincerely didn't want a public reckoning or a loud scandal. But she understood the situation was inevitable. Some guests were already filming on their phones, others exchanging impatient glances, caught up in the accusations against Anya and the hints at Margarita's own secrets. Sergei, holding his wife, asked, "Anya, please explain to us what's going on. I'm completely lost." Alexander Ivanovich, the patriarch, also turned to his daughter-in-law. "Speak, dear. Tell the truth. You know I'm a straightforward man. If someone's trying to deceive us, I'll get to the bottom of it. If it's lies or distortions, I'll sort that out too. But we can't stay in the dark." Anya scanned the room, seeing everyone waiting for her words. It was a difficult step, but she could no longer keep it inside. "In this envelope," she began, striving to keep her voice steady, "are documents I found at my mother's house in an old trunk. They were given to me after my mother passed away recently. She confessed some things I never knew my whole life. She said the truth would be revealed by one person named in these papers. That person's name is Margarita Pavlovna." The room fell silent again. The mention of Margarita Pavlovna's name caused a stir. What did it mean? Why was she named in Anya's mother's papers? "My mother," Anya continued, "was a modest woman. She worked as a museum guide. She never told me who my father was. I grew up without a father, and we lived modestly, to say the least, on her salary alone. But before she died, she told me I needed to find the person who could answer all my questions. She gave me the name Margarita. She said it might be someone else with that name, but in our family, there was only Margarita Pavlovna. I thought it might be her. I started searching for connections, digging through old documents, and found a letter my mother had kept. It mentioned how she once worked as a housemaid in a large house, and it referenced the name Margarita without a patronymic. The letter included financial calculations and stories about my mother expecting a child." Anya's voice softened, and her eyes glistened with tears. Some guests began to grasp where she was heading, while others were still piecing it together. But the intrigue thickened. "You're saying," Sergei began, looking at his wife in shock. "You're saying my mother—" "No, no." Margarita Pavlovna shouted, clenching her fists and glaring at Anya with hatred. "Don't you dare spout nonsense. It's a lie." Anya, tears in her eyes, pressed on. "I'm saying my mother hid where I came from all her life. She didn't want to ruin someone's life. But before she died, she asked me to find the documents and uncover the truth. After searching and finding indirect evidence, it became clear that Margarita Pavlovna might have been connected to a story my mother wrote about in those letters. There are many vague references, but one thing is clear. My mother received help from this family, and there were large payments so that she would disappear, so that she wouldn't ruin Mrs. Margarita Pavlovna's reputation. A cousin of Sergei's, known for unraveling family secrets, interjected loudly. "No," the mother-in-law exclaimed again. "I just wanted to help her. She asked for money. She was in a tough spot. And now this girl is twisting everything." The word girl sounded like an insult, especially given that Anya was pregnant and stood humiliated in the eyes of many guests. It looked utterly distasteful. Anya gathered her strength and took a deep breath. If it was just help, my mother wouldn't have spoken of an important secret, wouldn't have asked me to find you, and wouldn't have suffered years of remorse. And one more thing. The papers include a medical certificate stating I was born from a man close to you, Margarita Pavlovna. I haven't yet identified his name, but there's a suspicion it might be your brother or someone else in your family. All the threads lead to you." The guests shifted their gazes between Anya and the pale Margarita Pavlovna, who was both furious and shaken. "This is a lie, a fabrication," she cried. "She got pregnant by my son, and now wants to pass herself off as some secret relative to gain access to everything we have." "I never aimed for your inheritance," Anya said firmly. "I married Sergei for love. But what my mother told me before she died changed how I saw my family. I'm trying to uncover the truth. Unfortunately, you, Margarita Pavlovna, have always treated me with disdain from the start. Now I understand you might have recognized me or suspected something and decided to drive me and my unborn child out of your family to keep the truth hidden." Sergei, listening to this, seemed to turn to stone. The possibility that his wife, his mother's daughter-in-law, might also be part of their family through some tangled lineage sounded unbelievable, like a plot from a cheap soap opera. But the documents Anya held and his mother's reaction suggested the situation was far more serious than mere speculation. Alexander Ivanovich sat silently, his brow furrowed. A man of firm principles, he despised injustice. It was clear he was trying to stay calm, but his eyes betrayed his disapproval of Margarita Pavlovna striking the pregnant Anya and now hiding something. "Let's set aside these guesses for now," suggested one relative, Nikolai Petrovich, a distant uncle of Sergei's, around 50 years old. "We were here for a celebration, and it's turned into a scandal. We need to sort this out, but perhaps in a smaller circle. Anya, Sergei, Margarita Pavlovna, Alexander Ivanovich, you should discuss this privately. The rest of us shouldn't meddle in family secrets. Let's leave them to resolve this without extra ears." But the guests weren't eager to disperse. The thirst for sensation, the whispers, and the heightened emotions kept everyone on edge, waiting for more. Still, Nikolai Petrovich was respected, and gradually the gathering began to break up, some heading to the garden, others to the kitchen. Anya and Sergei sat side by side on the couch. Margarita Pavlovna stood, still clutching the envelope tightly. Alexander Ivanovich stood opposite and asked sternly, "Rita, what's going on? I can see it, I understand. This isn't just suspicion. You're hiding something." Those who knew Alexander Ivanovich well understood it was best not to lie to him. Despite the general belief that Margarita Pavlovna held the power in the family, her husband was the true authority with a steadfast character. He disliked public scandals and half-truths, but knew how to press on the most sensitive points when the truth was needed. Margarita Pavlovna tried to compose herself. "Sasha, don't interrogate me. I'm not hiding anything that could compromise me or the family. I'm not going to justify myself to this girl. I've put so much effort into raising our son, ensuring our family's well-being, and now she shows up, spreading rumors, blackmailing us with some secret, trying to drag me through the mud." Sergei, barely containing his outrage, said, "Mom, you hit Anya and called her a pauper. I'm not okay with that. We need a reason, a real one, not some made-up story. I've noticed your jabs and sideways glances at her so many times. And now there's talk of documents pointing to your past." Margarita Pavlovna, like a cornered animal, glanced from her husband to her son to Anya and hissed, "Fine, fine. Yes, maybe I knew her mother. Maybe she was a housemaid in my family's home. But I'm not her relative or anything like that. If she has proof otherwise, let her show it, and I'll take a DNA test if you want. But I assure you, it'll be a waste of time." The mention of a DNA test sent a wave of tension through the room. It was clear that if it came to such a step, the situation was indeed serious. At the same time, the thought lingered. If Margarita Pavlovna was so confident in her innocence, why not agree to the test? Anya spoke quietly but firmly. "I'm not asking you to take a test specifically, but to find out who in your family is connected to me. I'm ready to do anything to know the truth. If you're not involved, you have nothing to fear. So why have you been so aggressively against me for months, trying to belittle and humiliate me?" For a moment, Margarita Pavlovna looked away. She was always unsettled by how calmly and directly Anya spoke. Despite her outward softness, Anya had an inner strength that infuriated her mother-in-law. She wanted to break her, but Anya, despite financial dependence and social differences, knew how to respond and hold her ground. Because Margarita Pavlovna struggled for words. "I saw that you married Sergei not out of genuine love, but for gain. You needed money. It infuriated me. I don't like your poor family, your endless relatives who keep asking for financial help. I wanted to protect my son from your sinking ship dragging us down." Anya flinched but stood her ground. "Sergei and I have real feelings. Yes, my family isn't wealthy, but we've never asked you for a dime. If you noticed, I just needed to sort out my past after my mother's death. Unfortunately, all the threads led to you, hence your nervous behavior. You were afraid I'd uncover something." Margarita Pavlovna gave a crooked smile. "You shouldn't have dug into the past. Some things are better left there." Sergei frowned. "Mom, is there any truth to Anya's words? Could she be the daughter of someone in our family?" His mother shrugged. "I told you it could be my brother, who moved abroad years ago. You know we haven't spoken. Theoretically, he could have done something foolish with some girl. But what does that have to do with me? To be honest, there was a story. He came back for the holidays, threw wild parties. Could he have had a fling with a housemaid? Nobody knows. I don't remember. I was young then. Maybe he paid her off, and someone thought it was me." Alexander Ivanovich's face showed skepticism. "Really, Rita? Why didn't you ever mention this before? Why now, when these papers surface, are you fighting and shouting that it's a forgery?" Margarita Pavlovna, no longer mincing words, snapped, "I know these are dirty rumors, and this girl is trying to profit off our name. Sasha, you don't understand. If this gets out, we'll be dragged through the papers, social media. Can you imagine the blow to our reputation? You're a respected businessman, and now, a housemaid's lover, your wife's brother, an illegitimate daughter." Alexander Ivanovich winced at the word reputation, but seemed unconvinced that it justified his wife's actions. Sergei exhaled heavily and stood from the couch, offering Anya a place to rest. as she looked exhausted, her pregnant belly weighing her down. Anya, sit. Calm down, please. Think of the baby. Anya sat obediently, her eyes red from strain, but she tried not to cry. She knew that, in a single family celebration, she had partly shattered their world, but living under constant humiliation was unbearable. I'm ready to wait, she said. If Margarita Pavlovna truly believes it might be her brother, not her, let's find out. Is he alive? Are there any contacts? I don't want all these scandals. I just want to uncover the truth about who my father is and why my mother kept this secret her whole life. Margarita Pavlovna looked at her suspiciously, but with less aggression. Fine, she muttered. I doubt it, but I heard he married in France and later died in an accident. Her face remained cold, but a flicker of pain crossed her eyes. All right, we'll talk about this later. For now, maybe we should all calm down and try to get through this evening without further disgrace. But the evening was hopelessly ruined. The guests, caught up in their conversations, kept glancing at the family, gossiping about what had happened. Rumors grew, some absurd, like claims that Anya's mother gave birth young and abandoned her daughter. Whispers passed around, and the pile of rumors only grew. Feeling that Anya could no longer bear the prying stares, Sergei asked quietly, "Do you want to go home?" Anya nodded. She felt awful. Inside, she was torn, relieved that her mother-in-law could no longer attack her without consequence, yet wounded by the whole ordeal. She wanted to lie down and cry, but couldn't afford such weakness. She had to take many more steps to protect herself and her child. They said goodbye to the relatives. Many approached Anya, quietly offering sympathy or asking if she needed help or a doctor, given her pregnancy. She politely thanked them, assuring them her health was fine, just that she was tired. As they got into the car, Aunt Ludmilla slipped a small handkerchief into Anya's hand and whispered, "Hold on, dear. I'm so sorry it turned out this way. If you need to, stay with me. Don't hesitate to call." Anya hugged her aunt goodbye. "Thank you. I'm okay. I hope it'll all work out." Margarita Pavlovna didn't come to see them off. She stayed proudly in the living room, though everyone could see she was barely holding it together. Confronting the unknown brought by Anya's documents put her in a vulnerable position. She was used to a world where everything was under her control, but now something was slipping away. Sergei started the car and drove silently, the only sound the hum of the engine. Anya stroked her belly, and Sergei occasionally glanced at her, as if wanting to ask something but unable to find the words. Finally, he pulled over, turned off the engine, and faced his wife. "Anya, I'm sorry. I don't know what to say. I'm guilty for not protecting you right away when Mom." She placed her hand on his. "You're not guilty. I understand. You've always loved and respected your mother, and I didn't want to drive a wedge between you. But she attacked me, and I had no choice but to defend myself." "Why does she hate you so much?" he asked, pain in his voice. "She had no reason." "The reason is her fear," Anya replied. "She probably sees me as a threat to her position. Maybe your family isn't as perfect as it seems. There are secrets, skeletons in the closet, and I, without meaning to, became the key to that hidden door." Sergei pressed his palm to his eyes. "God, this sounds like a crazy script. I want us to live peacefully. We're going to have a child. I want him to be born and grow up in love, not in an atmosphere of scandals and suspicion." Anya sighed softly. "I want that too, my love. But avoiding it now is hard. Maybe we should do the test to find out who my father is. It might rule out false theories. My mother mentioned I should look not only for a woman named Margarita, but also a man who left her because his family opposed it." Sergei started the car again, and they drove on, stopping at a 24-hour pharmacy because Anya complained of a slight headache and needed to buy prenatal vitamins prescribed by her doctor. Sergei tried to surround her with care, which gave Anya the strength to keep fighting for the truth and their future. When they returned to their apartment, the home Sergei had bought before their marriage, Anya felt overwhelming exhaustion. She slowly walked to the bedroom and lay on the bed, shivering. Seeing her condition, Sergei hurried to close the curtains, turned on a night light, placed a glass of water by the bed, and helped her get comfortable. "Anechka, should we call a doctor?" he asked, worried. "No, it's not necessary. I'm just overwhelmed. I need a rest. Tomorrow, if needed, I'll see my OB/GYN. Don't worry, I'll manage." Sergei sat beside her, holding her hand. "I'm sorry for everything. I love you and our baby. I'll do everything to protect you." She gave a faint smile. "I know. Thank you. I hope we can get through all these trials." Sergei stroked her hair, feeling a storm of emotions: pain, love, confusion, anger at his mother. His entire life seemed to have turned upside down in one evening. But for Anya, he was ready to fight. While Anya fell asleep, Sergei went to the living room, opened his laptop, and started searching for information about his uncle, Margarita Pavlovna's brother, whom she had mentioned. He recalled his name was Igor, with the same surname as his mother's maiden name. After 10 minutes of searching various name combinations, he stumbled upon an old magazine archive mentioning a young, talented artist named Igor who had opened his own gallery. Sergei wasn't sure it was the same person, as the surname was slightly different, possibly a pseudonym. Then he remembered his father might have information about relatives, having been married to Margarita Pavlovna for years and knowing much about her family. But Sergei knew his father was likely busy calming his mother and was himself in turmoil. He decided to talk to him tomorrow. The next day, Anya woke up later than usual, feeling relatively okay, aside from weakness and emotional burnout. She tried doing prenatal exercises, but found her anxiety and dark thoughts made it hard to focus. Over breakfast, she and Sergei barely spoke, reluctant to revisit the previous day's nightmare. The silence was heavy with the weight of events. "I'll go talk to Dad." Sergei broke the silence as he prepared to leave. "If anything, I'll be reachable by phone." Anya nodded. "Okay, I'll rest for now, and maybe later I'll go to the women's clinic for a checkup." He kissed her forehead and left. Alone in the quiet apartment, Anya's thoughts swirled around her mother-in-law's possible reactions. What if she didn't stop and found new reasons to attack, or decided to get rid of her at all costs? Anya tried to push away these anxious thoughts. She had a vital reason to keep going: her child. Sergei arrived at his parents' house, where everything was quiet. He rang the doorbell, and after a long wait, his father appeared, looking grim. "Come in. Mom's still asleep. She had a sleepless night." Sergei entered, closing the door behind him. The hallway was as neat as ever, but a heavy atmosphere hung in the air. He followed his father to his study, a small room lined with wood, filled with bookshelves and a desk where Alexander Ivanovich often worked. As soon as the door closed, Sergei asked, "Did you know anything about this story with Anya's mother?" Alexander Ivanovich sat at the desk, resting his hands in front of him. "No, I didn't know your mother was connected to someone from her family and a housemaid. I always thought her brother Igor was reckless and moved abroad. We don't hear from him, but mentioning him always irritated her. I suspected she was angry at him for squandering money or the family fortune. Now I see it might be something else. She mentioned Igor might have had a fling with a housemaid. Dad, do you have any contact for Igor? Old letters, anything?" Sergei felt an unusual tremor. He disliked these confrontations, but knew they were necessary. "We need to look," his father replied. "When we moved to this house 10 years ago, we sorted through papers, and your mother said not to throw out letters from her brother, to keep them just in case. They might be in the storage room. but I'm not sure we'll find them quickly. Please look. It's important, Sergei urged. Anya wants to find her father, and he could be our relative. If he's alive, we need to know. If not, maybe he has children or someone who can clarify. His father nodded slowly. All right, I understand, son. But tell me, how are things with you and Anya? You saw the scandal yesterday. Your mother's furious. She still thinks Anya's using us to get a share of the inheritance. I don't believe she's after money, Sergei said. You saw her eyes. She's genuinely shaken. But Mom won't give us peace. Alexander Ivanovich sighed. I get it. But you know your mother. Status and reputation matter to her. A housemaid's granddaughter married to her son? It's turned her world upside down. Still, she needs to get a grip. I hope she'll see things more clearly with time. Sergei shook his head. I hope so. I want us to live in peace. Right now, Anya's suffering, afraid of new attacks, and we're expecting a child. His father stood, took a key from the desk, and headed to the storage room, where old boxes sat on high shelves. He gestured for Sergei to follow. They rummaged through boxes, finding family albums and old letters, including envelopes with foreign stamps addressed to Margarita Pavlovna from Paris and London, likely from Igor. Alexander Ivanovich carefully handed them to Sergei. Look through them. I don't want to pry into your mother's personal correspondence, but if you find something important, let me know. Sergei cautiously opened one letter, already unsealed, clearly read by his mother. It was written in Russian, but messily, as if Igor had scribbled in a rush. It mentioned a project, financial troubles, and a plea to borrow money, with phrases like, "You promised the family would help. Don't abandon me." The date was 20 years old. Sergei skimmed it and realized there was no direct mention of a child with a housemaid, but the fact that Igor asked for money suggested his mother might have helped him, as she controlled the family finances. Look, Sergei showed the letter to his father. It mentions a Vera, whom Igor wanted to have a child with or already had, and Mom was firmly against it. Alexander Ivanovich bit his lip. I see. So that's it. He sighed, cradling his head in his hands. Lord, how many secrets this family holds. Why did your mother hide this? We could have talked it out, sorted it. She was probably afraid it would ruin her reputation, reveal something she wanted buried, Sergei said. He continued reading. The letter contained Igor's resentment toward his sister for ruining his life, forcing him to leave Vera, whom he truly loved. Vera was pregnant, but Igor, having left, didn't know what became of her. He asked Margarita for money to start over, promising not to ask again if she helped. He wrote, I know you already arranged something with Vera, but her trail's gone. Don't think that settles it. Sergei closed the multi-page letter, feeling sick from the revelations. He imagined how cruelly his mother had acted, essentially forcing Igor to abandon Vera, likely deeming her unsuitable. She wanted to avoid a scandal. But why did Anya say the documents named Margarita specifically? Probably because she was the one who paid Vera to disappear and not disrupt their lives. It all added up. Anya was the daughter of Igor and Vera, and her father never knew of her birth. Margarita ensured the secret stayed buried, and now she despised her daughter-in-law, fearing the truth would surface. Sergei and his father exchanged looks, understanding without words that it was time to confront Margarita Pavlovna and show her these letters. Let her get dressed and compose herself, Alexander Ivanovich said, but we need to act carefully. Your mother's sensitive. This truth could give her a heart attack. Sergei shrugged. His mother didn't seem sensitive. She was ironclad. But now, he saw that iron was brittle when it came to her past mistakes. An hour later, Margarita Pavlovna emerged from her room. Seeing her husband and son in the study with papers on the table, she tensed. Sergei gestured for her to approach. Mom, look what we found among your old letters, he said calmly, handing her Igor's letter. She skimmed it, her face growing darker. And what of it? She asked. Alexander Ivanovich asked directly, was it your brother Igor who fell in love with Vera, wanted to marry her, and she got pregnant? You were against it, and it was all hushed up. Vera was paid off to disappear, right? Margarita Pavlovna grimaced. Yes, almost exactly. Vera was from a poor family, like Anya. We didn't want that marriage. Mom and Dad were against it, and I handled everything, the money, the agreements. Igor was young and foolish, thinking love conquers all. But I knew it would lead to nothing good. Vera was a nice girl, but we didn't want Igor marrying her. The family insisted. I was just following my parents' wishes. Sergei couldn't believe his ears. Just following their wishes? He echoed. You ruined two people's lives. A child was born without a father. What did you do when you found out Vera had the baby? We weren't sure she'd keep it, Margarita replied. We thought she might terminate. When the child was born, she moved to another city. We paid her to never mention Igor or our family. Maybe it was wrong, but it was necessary. Igor was unstable, and our family was building a business connections. Any scandal would have ruined us. Her voice was cold, but Sergei detected notes of exhaustion, almost guilt. And you kept quiet all these years? Alexander Ivanovich asked rhetorically. Yes, she said softly, because Igor took his own life a couple of years later when things went wrong abroad. Or he died, I don't know exactly. Mutual acquaintances told me. He stopped writing, and Vera vanished. I hoped the story was forgotten. Then, out of nowhere, this Anya appears, who turns out to be Vera's daughter, meaning she's my niece. Sergei sank into a chair. So, Anya's my cousin. I married my own cousin. Silence fell like a heavy stone. Do you realize what this means? He croaked. Alexander Ivanovich, who knew a bit about genetics, tried to calm him. It's unsettling that you're cousins, but the risks aren't as high as people think. The law doesn't prohibit cousin marriages, though society frowns on it. Sergei's body tensed. God, Mom, did you even consider this could happen? Why didn't you say anything when I brought Anya home? I didn't know. Was that Vera? His mother said quietly. I never saw her face, only knew her name and corresponded a few times. Her surname could have been anything. When you said you were dating Anna Petrova, let's call her that, I didn't connect it to Vera, but when I saw her once, her features vaguely reminded me of Igor. I started digging, asking questions, and learned her mother was Vera. That's when I got scared. I thought she knew everything and was after our inheritance. Maybe I overreacted. Overreacted? Sergei shouted. You crushed everything we have. We loved each other. Now what do we do, knowing we're cousins? His father rubbed his eyes. Calm down, son. You need to discuss this with Anya. You're already married, expecting a child. By human standards, it's a tough situation, but you're not to blame. You weren't told the truth earlier. Margarita Pavlovna remarked grimly. Anya knew perfectly well. I'm sure she figured it out before you and went ahead anyway. Don't accuse her. Sergei snapped. She only recently found those documents and realized who her father was. Her mother hid it. She was seeking the truth to understand herself, not to blackmail you. His mother sighed heavily, realizing the situation had spiraled far beyond her control. Sergei clutched Igor's letter, his mind a whirl of love for Anya, paternal feelings for their unborn child, and horror at their blood relation. It wasn't their fault. It was orchestrated by the older generation, terrified of tarnishing their reputation. Mom, Dad, Sergei said, his voice trembling, we need to consult doctors, a geneticist, to understand the risks for our child if we're cousins. I love Anya and don't want to lose her, but now everything's so complicated. Calm down, his father said. I've heard the risk of abnormalities isn't as high as people think. Such marriages exist in some cultures. But yes, you need a consultation. Margarita Pavlovna stood tense, as if awaiting punishment. Her face showed a mix of guilt, disdain, and fear. She likely realized the mess she'd caused. "What will you do, son?" his father asked. Sergei stood heavily. "I'll go to Anya and tell her everything. We'll decide together how to move forward." Turning to his mother with indignation, he added, "And don't you dare insult Anya again. She's a victim of your and your brother's story. So am I." "Son," Margarita began, but he didn't want to hear it. He left the house, holding Igor's letters to show Anya, unsure how she'd react to the devastating truth that they were cousins. Would she hate the situation and leave him? It would be a shock. They loved each other so much. Could they continue their marriage knowing their blood tie? With these thoughts, he drove home to Anya, his heart constricting. Just yesterday, they were an ordinary couple, despite minor disputes with his mother. Today, reality had turned upside down. When he returned, Anya was lying on the couch, covered with a blanket. Seeing him, she sat up, sensing something was wrong. "Serioza, what's with you?" she asked, catching the panic in his eyes. He sat beside her, gripping her hand tightly. It was painful and frightening to speak, but he knew he couldn't hide it. "Anechka, I found Igor's letters, my mom's brother. It seems," he faltered, and she watched him intently. "It seems Igor was your father. Your mother, Vera, and he were in love, but my grandparents, my mom's parents, were against it. Mom hid it all. Igor left, had problems, and died. But you're Igor's daughter." Anya's face showed no joy at the revelation. In horror, she threw up her hands. "So, you and I, Sergei, were blood relatives? Cousins?" "Yes, it seems we're cousins," he confirmed. Anya jerked back, pressing her hands to her belly, her eyes wide. "God, and we're married, expecting a child. This is a nightmare." "It's terrifying here, I know," Sergei said. "But we're not to blame. We didn't choose this. If we'd known earlier, none of this would have happened. But now, we love each other. We're expecting a child." She burst into bitter tears. "How do we live with this? Who will understand us? What will people say if they find out? And I feel disgust, not at you, but at this whole situation. How could our families do this?" Sergei hugged her, trying to comfort her, though he was on edge himself. "Let people say what they want. The main thing is what we want. We can get a genetic test to assess the risks. I spoke to Dad. Sometimes cousin marriages don't lead to issues, but we need to check." Anya buried her face in his shoulder. "I love you and our baby, but I don't know if I can live like before." Everything inside me has flipped. A heavy silence settled. Sergei understood she needed time to process. He couldn't imagine how they'd move forward. They sat, embracing, Anya quietly crying as he stroked her hair, thinking how cruel the price of family secrets, lies, and arrogance was. "Let's at least see a doctor," he suggested after a pause. "We'll consult about our situation, the baby's health, maybe do genetic tests. Then we'll decide what to do next." "Okay," Anya whispered. "I really need a doctor right now." Sergei helped her up, gathered the necessary documents, and within an hour, they were at a private clinic with Anya's regular OB/GYN. When they, heads lowered, revealed they might be cousins, the doctor reacted more calmly than they expected. "It's not an uncommon story, though socially uncomfortable. Genetically, the risk of abnormalities increases, but it's not guaranteed. We can do biochemical tests or an amniocentesis at certain stages to rule out serious issues." Anya sat, clutching her hands on her lap, ashamed and scared to discuss this even with the doctor. The doctor continued, "The main thing is not to stress too much. The baby feels your emotional state. Let's first confirm your cousins. Right now, it's just an assumption based on letters. A paternity test can be done if you have biological material from the alleged father or his close relatives." Sergei gave a wry smile. We have my mother, the sister of the alleged father. A blood test could confirm if Anya's related to her, showing if she's her brother's daughter. The doctor nodded. Exactly. If the genetic test shows you're Margarita Pavlovna's niece, Anya, then you're definitely Sergei's cousin. Then we'll assess risks, and you'll decide what matters most to you. Everyone has their own moral and ethical principles. But first, let's focus on the baby's health and your mental well-being. She looked at Anya with empathy. I'm sorry you're facing this stress. Take care of yourself, try not to panic, and give yourself time to process. They thanked the doctor, who referred them to a geneticist and scheduled the earliest possible appointment. Outside, Anya struggled not to break down again. Sergei hugged her. I'm sorry, he whispered. There's nothing to forgive. You're not to blame, she replied softly, resting her head on his chest. I love you, he said firmly. I won't leave you, no matter what people say. She closed her eyes, trying to imagine how they'd live in this absurd situation. But something in Sergei's voice gave her confidence they'd find a solution. Thus began a new chapter in their complex lives, filled with uncertainty, doctor visits, and talks with Sergei's mother and father. The word genetic test loomed ominously, but they knew it was the only way to clarify the truth and decide their next steps. The next day, Sergei called his father to say they wanted to ask his mother to voluntarily provide a DNA sample, like a cheek swab. Alexander Ivanovich promised to talk to his wife and call back. When he did, he said, Sergei, it's tough. Your mother's hysterical, refusing any tests, shouting she won't let the family be shamed. She thinks it's all Anya's scheme. Damn it, Sergei cursed. Without the test, we can't know for sure, and only she can confirm the relation to Igor. I understand, son. I'll try to convince her, but she's digging in, saying she won't be part of this circus. Sergei hung up in frustration, staring at his phone. He realized his mother valued her imagined reputation more than her son and daughter-in-law's fate. When he told Anya, she gave a bitter smile. Then we'll need alternatives. Like we could use her hairbrush or comb. DNA can be extracted from that. Sergei sighed. Yeah, getting a few hairs with roots. But it feels like espionage. I don't want to do it that way. But if she refuses, they knew it was unethical, but there might be no other way. How else could they prove it? Before resorting to such measures, Sergei decided to speak to his mother in person. He drove to his parents' house and found her sitting alone by the window in the living room, looking worn out. Mom, he began gently, trying not to pressure her. I know this is hard, but we need this test to know the truth. She turned, and he saw her red eyes. You have all the letters, all the evidence. Isn't that enough? It's not enough, Sergei said. I'm sure she's Igor's daughter, so my cousin. But I need more than clues, 100% confirmation for the doctors too. It affects our child's future. If there's a risk of genetic issues, we need certainty. She looked at him with pain. You talk like you want to keep things as they are. Yes, Mom, he said firmly. I love Anya. Even if we're cousins, we want to stay together, and we're having a child. Disgust flashed across her face. That's unnatural. Are you out of your mind? He stood defiantly. It may sound strange, but we're not to blame. If there's a chance to have a healthy child and move forward, we'll do it. I don't care about society's rules. Love is stronger. His mother stood and looked him in the eyes. I won't take any tests. Ever. At that moment, Alexander Ivanovich entered. Rita, I think you're wrong. Don't ruin our son's life. He'll find the truth, with or without your help. She froze, realizing her husband and son were united against her. You don't understand the bomb you're planting, she began, but stopped, seeing Sergei's scornful smirk. Society? He asked. Mom, I don't care what neighbors, business partners, or socialites think. I care that my wife doesn't cry every night and that my child is born healthy. With that, He turned and left, realizing persuading her was futile. But a desire grew to obtain her samples secretly, however low it seemed. The next day, when his mother was out, Sergei slipped into their house under the pretense of meeting his father. His father, learning of his intent, sighed heavily but didn't interfere. Sergei went to the bathroom, where his mother's hairbrushes sat on shelf. One had several hairs. He carefully wrapped them in a bag. "I know this looks awful, Dad," he said as he left, "but she's left us no choice." "Do what you think is right," Alexander Ivanovich said sadly, watching him go. Sergei secured his mother's DNA sample and arranged with the clinic for genetic testing, informing them he had a relative's biological material. They needed to formalize everything and pay a hefty sum, but Sergei was ready to get answers. When he told Anya, she was slightly shocked. "You did it secretly?" "Yes," he admitted. "Otherwise, she'd destroy everything. We can't live without clarity." She nodded sadly, understanding the situation forced their hand. They submitted the samples, Anya's from a cheek swab, and were told to wait about 2 weeks for results. That time was torture. They were 99% sure Anya was Margarita Pavlovna's niece, but until the official report, a tiny hope lingered that maybe Igor and Vera didn't have a child, and Anya was someone else's daughter. To distract herself, Anya spent more time with Ludmila, her mother's sister, who worked in another city. They weren't close, and Ludmila knew little of Vera's life, but now Anya learned more about her mother's past and how she abruptly cut ties with her family years ago. Ludmila didn't know the full story about the mysterious man, but was sure Vera loved him. She kept a couple of photos where a young Vera stood with a man, but his face was blurry. Anya guessed with pain it might be Igor. Sergei, meanwhile, searched for details about Igor's death. He found French online archives indicating Igor died in an accident, his body buried abroad, with no children from his marriage. This meant Anya was his only daughter, unknown to him. Sergei felt a bitter pang. Igor could have been happy with Vera, if not for his mother and family's interference. Anya might not have grown up fatherless. Rumors spread that Anya might be Sergei's relative. Some relatives hinted it was scandalous for them to stay together. Others said it was too late, that love mattered more. Opinions split, but all agreed it was a major scandal. Yet Sergei noticed public judgment bothered him less than his moral struggles and Anya's state. It pained him when she woke at night, anxious about their child being from cousins, fearing abnormalities, ashamed, blaming herself despite being blameless. "Go to a therapist," Sergei suggested one day. "It's the right thing, especially in your condition." She agreed. The therapist helped her see she wasn't responsible for others' actions, that the guilt lay with those who hid the truth and broke lives. Anya grew calmer, realizing their love wasn't a sin, but a tragic twist of fate. One evening, on the therapist's advice, she started a conversation with Sergei. "I want to baptize the baby after he's born. Let it be a blessing, even if it means nothing to some. I want it." He hugged her. "Okay, darling, whatever you want. Maybe I'll join in." Anya read parenting books, trying to focus on motherhood. Sergei kept searching for information about Igor. When the genetic test results were ready, he went to pick up the envelope alone, knowing Anya was too sensitive for more stress. He sat in the waiting room, signed documents, and was handed a sealed envelope. In the car, unable to wait, he tore it open and read the scientific jargon until he reached the key point. The degree of relation between Margarita Pavlovna and Anna showed a 99% plus match. The genetic data confirmed Margarita Pavlovna was the sister of Anya's father. All doubts vanished. Anya was her niece, and thus Sergei's cousin. Sergei rested his head on the steering wheel, wanting to scream, to explode with rage at his mother. But he had to go home and tell Anya. He found her in the living room, knitting to calm herself. Seeing his face, she understood instantly. "The result's positive, isn't it?" she asked, setting down her yarn. He sat beside her, hugging her shoulders. "Yes, it's confirmed. You're Igor's daughter, Mom's your aunt, and you're my cousin." Tears welled in her eyes. "So it's final." She broke down, burying her face in his chest. He knew nothing could be done. They'd live with this truth. The question was how. After the initial shock, they tried to gather their thoughts. What now? Stay together? They were legally married and didn't want a divorce. Their child was due soon. "I don't want to leave you," Anya said, sobbing. "I don't want our child to grow up without a father. And your love, we can't live without it." Sergei squeezed her hand. "I don't want to lose you either. We'll have to live with this. If people find out, let them judge, but I can't abandon you and our child. I love you both." They agreed not to publicize their relation, but not to lie to close family who asked. Officially, they remained husband and wife. Sergei booked a geneticist appointment for further tests to assess fetal risks. Anya agreed to an amniocentesis, a painful procedure to analyze amniotic fluid for genetic issues. It was scary, but she knew it was the only way to find peace. When Margarita Pavlovna learned the test confirmed their relation, she fell into a sullen silence, seemingly unsure how to handle the undeniable truth. Alexander Ivanovich supported Sergei and Anya, visiting them, bringing groceries. "How are you, Anya?" he asked with clear sympathy. "Trying to hold on," she replied, forcing a smile. "We're waiting for the test results for abnormalities. If everything's okay, we'll try to move forward as a family." "I hope it works out," he nodded. "I read that cousins don't always have unhealthy children, so there's a chance." She looked away, still pained to discuss it, but was grateful for Sergei's father's wisdom. Finally, the geneticist delivered the results. The specialist cautiously said there were no signs of serious genetic anomalies, and the risk of congenital defects was low. No test offered 100% certainty, but the child was likely to be healthy. For Anya and Sergei, this was a relief. They left the office, embracing in the hallway. Anya's tears were now of joy. "It'll be okay. We have a future." Sergei held her close. "I promise I'll do everything to make you happy. We'll get through this mess." They decided, despite societal prejudices, to stay together and raise their child. To friends and relatives, they said suspicions of relation weren't confirmed, dodging the most curious. But close family, including Sergei's mother, knew the truth, and some gossiped. Not everyone was shocked. Some turned away, but others accepted Anya as Sergei's lawful wife. Margarita Pavlovna stayed away from their home, but occasionally called to check on Anya's condition. One day, unexpectedly, she asked to visit. Anya was taken aback, but agreed. When Margarita Pavlovna arrived, she looked aged, her former arrogance gone. She greeted them quietly, eyes downcast. Anya felt nervous, but remained composed. "I came to talk," Margarita said, asking to sit. They settled in the living room, and she spoke softly. "I've thought about everything that happened. I admit I'm largely to blame. I had no right to decide people's fates. Now my son and my niece," her voice trembled, and she paused. "You're in love, married, expecting a child. I don't know what to say except I'm sorry." Sergei was stunned. He'd never heard such a repentant tone from his mother. He expected pride, arrogance, but here she was sincerely looking at Anya, a tear rolling down her cheek. "I understand you may not forgive me," she added, "but I want my grandson to grow up in a family without such hostility. I'm ready to accept you if you'll allow it." Anya, though hurt and resentful, wasn't vindictive. "I'm sorry it turned out this way," she said quietly. "If you told the truth from the start, Mom." "Aunt." The word aunt sounded strange, and Margarita flinched. "I was too proud," she admitted. "I thought I was doing the right thing, protecting the family from shame." Instead, I caused destruction. Anya nodded, signaling she was open to peace. Holding on to anger was exhausting. I found documents about Igor in an old trunk. Photos, letters. Margarita continued. You might want to learn more about your father. I hope you'll forgive me for not letting him be happy with your mother. Anya took the envelope, her hands trembling. Inside were photos of a young man resembling Sergei, but with different eyes. Her heart ached. She was seeing her father for the first time. She struggled not to cry in front of her mother-in-law. "Thank you," she whispered. "This means a lot to me." Thus, a difficult reconciliation took place. Margarita Pavlovna left, leaving an impression of a broken, repentant woman. They didn't expect miracles from her, but her ceasing hostility was significant. Weeks passed, and Anya's pregnancy neared its end. She and Sergei prepared the nursery, choosing a crib and baby clothes. Sergei's father visited, bringing supplies, while his mother kept her distance but called to check on Anya. Anya tried not to dwell on the past, focusing on their child. In late summer, Anya went into labor at night. Sergei, in a panic, grabbed bags and documents, calling a taxi since his car was broken. Anya endured the pain, breathing as she'd learned in classes. They reached the hospital without fuss, and doctors prepared for delivery. Sergei waited outside, his heart pounding, sweat on his brow. Hours later, he heard a baby's cry. The doctor emerged, smiling. "Congratulations, Dad. It's a boy. Everything's fine. The baby's healthy, and Mom's doing okay." Sergei beamed, tears in his eyes. Healthy was the key word. He nearly collapsed with relief after so much fear and agonizing waiting. When Anya was moved to her room, he entered, exhausted but elated. She held a tiny boy with dark hair. Looking at her husband, her eyes shone with love and quiet joy. "Look, our son." He leaned in, kissing her cheek. "Hello, little one. I'm your dad." Tears of joy washed away the bitter residue of the past months. In that moment, they were the happiest family, despite the secrets of the past. Days later, when Anya and the baby were discharged, Sergei's father and even Margarita Pavlovna visited. She approached the crib, looking at the tiny boy they named Igor, after his grandfather. Her gaze held a complex mix of regret, remorse, and tenderness. She gently touched his hand. "Igor," she repeated softly, looking at the child. "I hope we'll be happy." Alexander Ivanovich put an arm around her shoulders, and Sergei, holding Anya's hand, gave a slight smile. "We all hope so." A new life entered their family, soothing old wounds. They still had to learn to live with Anya and Sergei's relation, face neighbors' sidelong glances or acquaintances' guesses. But those who knew them closely saw their love was stronger than prejudice. A random, absurd mistake of the past shouldn't doom their happiness. They chose to move forward for themselves and for Igor, whom they believed fate had destined for a good path. Anya was no pauper, as her mother-in-law had scornfully called her. She was rich in spirit, a strong woman who overcame trials without breaking under contempt and aggression. Margarita Pavlovna, too, perhaps realized over time that no money or status was worth ruining lives. Ahead lay a long road where they'd learn to communicate without lies or arrogance, adjusting to their unusual family tree. But the birth of their boy was a new beginning, a symbol that life could heal the deepest wounds. Each of them, Anya, Sergei, Margarita Pavlovna, Alexander Ivanovich, and the other relatives, took away a lesson. Never hide the truth. Never place pride or reputation above human feelings, or retribution might catch up, as it did with everyone in this story when Margarita paled with fear before a past she so desperately wanted to forget. Now, that envelope, once tearing the family apart, sits with new photos of little Igor and Sergei and Anya's family album. On the shelf lie letters, archived documents, and reminders of how fragile peace can be when people fail to speak the truth. Alongside are photos of Anya, Sergei, and their son, a symbol that love can break through the most impregnable walls and light the way, no matter how difficult the path may seem. Thus ended one of the greatest dramas of their lives, and perhaps the most important began, a life for their child, for a future where they'd learn understanding, forgiveness, and care for each other, despite conventions and past mistakes. Thank you for listening to the story until the end. Subscribe to the channel and share this video with your friends and loved ones. It motivates us to keep working on new stories every day. Don't miss the next amazing story that's about to appear on your screen. We're very grateful to have you with us. See you soon.